Hey friends, it's Mary Giordano, and welcome to Unapologetically Wild. Every single day, you have a choice. You can stay where you are, or you can step into the possibility of something even greater. And I'm here to spark that flame within you and inspire you to show up, embrace the fear, and do the fucking thing. Messy, scared, and real. Let's get started. Hey friends, welcome back to Unapologetically Wild. If you're a dog lover, if you've ever had a soul dog, the kind that's been with you through it all, who knows your energy better than most people do, and whose eyes feel like home, then this episode is for you. Because today, I'm not talking about mindset or morning routines or micro shifts. I'm sharing something real and raw that's been happening behind the scenes in my world. It's about my sweet girl, Phoebe. My almost 14-year-old yellow lab who's hiked with me, road tripped across the country, slept in tents, cars, and RVs, collected rocks from every river, lake, ocean she has been in, and held space for me in more ways than I can put into words. Over the last few months, my travels, my workouts, even my business quietly took a back seat because Phoebe needed me, and loving her meant pausing everything else no matter what. This isn't just a story about terrifying respiratory episodes, impossible decisions, and moments I thought I was going to lose her. It's also about presence, about resilience, and what happens when life pulls you in a different direction than you planned. It's also educational, especially if you've never heard of laryngeal paralysis, or you wouldn't know what signs to even look for. It's personal, it's vulnerable, and if you've ever loved a dog like this, you'll feel every single word. Let's get into it. Before I get into the full story, I want to offer a quick disclaimer. I am not a vet. Everything I'm about to share is based on my personal experience, my background as a nurse, and what worked for Phoebe. This episode is meant to inform, not diagnose. So if you suspect something similar with your own dog, please contact your vet before doing anything. Now let's start with a little education, because unless you've had a dog go through this, you probably haven't heard of laryngeal paralysis, or Lar Par for short. It's actually really common in senior labs, and it's one of those conditions that's easy to mistake for normal aging until it becomes something more serious. Here's what it is in simple terms. There are two pieces of cartilage in a dog's throat, kind of like little flaps, that are supposed to open wide when they breathe and close when they swallow. This protects the airway and keeps food and water from going into the lungs. But with laryngeal paralysis, the nerves that control those flaps start to degenerate. Eventually, they become paralyzed, meaning the flaps don't open or close the way they should. Breathing gets harder, especially when the dog is excited, overheated, or exercising. And in more advanced cases, like Phoebe, those flaps can actually get sucked inward when the dog tries to take a deep breath, blocking the airway completely. That's when you see sudden choking, blue gums, and collapse. And if you don't catch it fast, it can be fatal. What a lot of people don't know is that this isn't just a throat issue. It's actually a nerve issue. The same nerves that control the airway also run to the hind end, which is why a lot of dogs with Lar Par also start showing back end weakness. That combination is called GULP, geriatric onset laryngeal paralysis and polyneuropathy. And that's why it gets missed so often. The hoarse bark, the extra panting, the hind end getting weaker. It's all stuff that can look like normal aging until one day it's not. And that's where my story starts. A couple of years ago, I noticed Phoebe's bark change. It got hoarse. It was subtle but unmistakable, and because I'd been through this before with my last lab, Zoe, I knew right away that Phoebe now too had laryngeal paralysis, and I was crushed. See, back in 2013, when I lost my first dog, Zoe, I didn't know what Lar Par was. I thought her symptoms, panting more, a hoarse bark, not being able to hike anymore, were just part of getting older. By age 10, she was done doing long walks. Her hind end looked unstable, and I chalked it up to bad hips or arthritis. But in hindsight, all of it pointed to Lar Par. It's just that no one caught it. And that's what happens to so many people, because the signs are so subtle at first, they're easy to brush off as normal aging. So when Phoebe's bark changed, I didn't brush it off. I brought it up to my vet, and the next time she went under for a procedure, they scoped her airway and confirmed she did in fact have laryngeal paralysis. But at that point, she was doing great. The only symptom she had was a hoarse bark. She was still hiking, still swimming, still diving for rocks and keeping up with Petra. She had no weakness, no breathing issues, and unlike Zoe, whose back leg started to give out early on, Phoebe's hind end was strong. It was solid. She was unstoppable. And I don't know if it's because of all the activity we've done over the years or the nerve degeneration just hadn't reached that part of her body yet, but either way, she was thriving, and I wanted to keep her that way for as long as I could. So I got proactive. I started her on supportive herbs and supplements, which I'll link down in the show notes. And then around August of 2024, I joined a Lar Par support group on Facebook just to stay informed and get ahead of anything that might come up. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would shift from managing to crisis mode, and that's what I'm going to get into next. The first time Phoebe collapsed, it was just a regular afternoon in August. I was sitting at my kitchen table working just like any other day. Phoebe was napping on the floor next to me like she's done 1,000 times before. Petra was curled up on the couch. The windows were open. The birds were chirping. The scent of late summer was in the air. I had music playing in the background like I always do. And then, out of nowhere, Phoebe woke up, coughed twice. She jumped up, bolted out the doggy door, and leapt off the deck. I thought she was going to vomit because that's what she always does when she's nauseous. She runs outside. I think I unintentionally trained that into them by dragging them out the door every time they hacked as puppies. But this time was different. She landed, wobbled, and then collapsed. I ran out the door after her, dropped to my knees. I was screaming her name, shaking her, trying to stand her up, trying anything to get a response. But she was completely unresponsive. What was probably only a few seconds felt like an eternity. I was certain she was gone. But then, out of nowhere, she stood up, she shook it off, and looked at me, totally normal. No discoloration, no limping, no signs anything had even happened. It shook me to my core. That was the first moment I felt in my heart like I lost her. And even if only for a second, it felt completely tragic. I still didn't know what happened. Was it a seizure, a fluke, a reaction to something? I had no idea, but she seemed fine. I called the vet. I let them know. They told me to keep an eye on her. And for a few days, she was her normal self. But then about 5 days later, it happened again. The same exact scenario. This time, I was on a Zoom call at my kitchen table and Phoebe was laying on her side next to me. She woke up with a little cough, bolted out the doggy door, and collapsed again in the backyard. But this time, it was just a little worse. Her body arched back. She went stiff, almost like a seizure, and it took her much longer to come to. I was right there again, shaking her, calling her name, doing anything I could. When she finally woke up, she was a little more tired than the first time, but otherwise, she seemed okay again. But of course, I was not. I called the vet immediately, got her in the next morning. We did blood work. They listened to her heart. They ran all kinds of tests. Everything came back totally normal. She looked amazing for a senior pup. Labs were perfect. Her heart sounded good. Her lungs were clear. And they told me, let's just keep an eye on it, which I wasn't 100% comfortable with. But what else were we to do? So that's what I did. I kept an eye on her. Over the next few months, we went camping, we hiked, we swam, we paddleboarded, we did all of our favorite things. And for a while, everything seemed okay. There was no progression in her Lar Par symptoms, no heavy panting, no signs of weakness. No more collapsing episodes. I started to convince myself that those two events were just total flukes. Maybe she got into something, though she never does, but I was just trying to rationalize it. Everything seemed fine until it didn't. Toward the end of November, I started noticing more hacking. Not intense, but enough to start paying attention. So I dug a little deeper. I joined a Lar Par Facebook group just to educate myself and learn what other symptoms to watch for, see what other people were trying, what worked, what didn't. And honestly, that group became a huge resource for me. I was reading stories, watching videos, learning everything I could. Several people mentioned acupuncture and Chinese medicine, especially early on, and shared how much it had helped with their dog. So I decided to give it a shot. I went online, I did my research, and I found a mobile Chinese medicine vet with incredible reviews and amazing results. The only catch was she wasn't booking until the end of January. But I didn't care. I just knew she was the one I wanted to work with. So I booked the appointment and figured the holidays would fly by. January would be here before I knew it. The holidays went by, my mom was here, we had an amazing time, Phoebe was doing fantastic, but then on January 19th, just 9 days before her first acupuncture appointment, I was sitting in the living room on the recliner working on this podcast. It was about to launch in 4 days, and I still had a ton to do. Phoebe and Petra were curled up on the couch across from me, sleeping peacefully. And then all of a sudden, Phoebe coughed. Once, twice, she lifted her head, and it happened again. Her head and her whole upper body arched way back. I immediately knew what was happening. Her entire body went rigid. I ran to her, petting her, shaking her gently, calling her name. Her gums turned blue, and she wasn't breathing. A few people in the Facebook group mentioned that when their dogs collapsed, they would rub their neck and the dog would come to. So I rubbed her neck, and finally she came back, but it took much longer this time, and something in me shifted. And I knew in that moment, this wasn't a fluke anymore. This was serious. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew I could not take my eyes off of her. Every time I looked at her, I thought, what if I wasn't here when it happened? What if I was running an errand? What if she was in the truck? What if I was in the shower? What if I was too late? But I was there. I had been there every single time, and I kept reminding myself of that. But now I couldn't take any chances. I had to be by her side at all times. I took Phoebe back to the vet. They ran more blood work, listened to her heart, ordered a chest x-ray, and again, everything came back normal. So I decided I'm taking it a bit further. I scheduled a full workup at CSU, Colorado State University, one of the top veterinary teaching hospitals in the country. I wanted all the opinions. I needed answers. Was this for Lar Par? Was it cardiac, neurological, something else entirely? I had no idea. One of the most confusing aspects of Phoebe's episodes was that they were happening at rest, which is incredibly uncommon. Most Lar Par dogs who collapse from excitement or exercise or getting too hot. The fact that Phoebe was collapsing after waking up from a nap made no sense when it came to everything I had read, heard, and been told. But something in my gut was telling me this was 100% her airway failing because of her Lar Par. It didn't check the usual boxes, but I trusted what I was seeing. And thankfully and unexpectedly, I wasn't navigating it alone. The light in all of this was the Chinese medicine vet I had recently hired. She hadn't even met Phoebe in person yet. But the moment I updated her via email about Phoebe's last episode, she jumped right in. She told me exactly what to share with CSU, what questions to ask, what tests to push for. She answered every email, every text, every call, and held space for me in a way that made everything feel just a little more manageable. I hadn't expected that level of support so early on because we hadn't even had our first appointment yet, but it was a great reminder that the right people always show up exactly when you need them most. When we went to CSU, Phoebe saw neurology, she saw cardiology, they ran an echocardiogram, did a full physical, and a complete neurological assessment. And the consensus? They were stumped. They kept saying how healthy she was for being almost 14. Her heart was strong, her lungs were clear, her neuro exam was totally normal. No one could explain it. I told them I was pretty certain it was her Lar Par because she wakes up, she coughs, and then it's like she loses her airway. But it didn't match the textbook. Like I said earlier, Lar Par episodes don't usually happen at rest. They happen when a dog is panting, overheated, or excited. Not when they're curled up on the couch in the middle of a nap. A couple of the vets thought maybe she was having a random arrhythmia, a sudden electrical misfire in the heart that triggered her collapse. They suggested a Holter monitor, which is a wearable EKG, to track her heart for a max of 2 weeks. But her episodes were too random. They were too far apart. The odds of catching one during that window were slim to none. So I declined it. Still, my gut said it was her airway, and I was terrified. Terrified of missing it, terrified of walking into the next room and finding her gone, terrified of sleeping too soundly and not hearing that warning cough. So I stopped everything. I stopped working out because Phoebe didn't want to be down in the basement where I exercised. I stopped traveling because I didn't know when the next episode would hit and I couldn't risk being in the middle of nowhere when it did. I stopped creating because mentally and physically, I was fried. There was no space left in my brain for creativity. I stopped doing all the things that normally anchor me because Phoebe needed me. Almost 24/7 supervision, constant eyes on her, and I wasn't willing to risk her life by stepping away. Some people might think I'm crazy, but Phoebe needed me, and I wasn't going to let her down. After Phoebe's appointment at CSU on January 27th, things were actually looking up. She'd had her first acupuncture session, was on a custom blend of Chinese herbs, and the results were actually promising. She was walking without panting, resting peacefully, hacking less. She just seemed more like herself. I had already started reading more about Lar Par procedures, what they were, how they worked, the pros and cons, just to be more informed. But still, no one was certain that these episodes were related directly to her Lar Par. So I didn't want to rush into anything. I wanted to believe that maybe we could manage it, that maybe we'd turn a corner. So when a stretch of sunshine rolled in at the end of February, I decided we needed a fun day, a real one. I made plans with 2 friends, and we grabbed lunch before heading to the Boulder Reservoir with the dogs. It was one of those warm, blue sky Colorado days that remind you why you live here. Everything felt light again. Phoebe was in her element, wading in the water, collecting her rocks like usual. Petra was zooming along the shore, full of energy, trying to herd Phoebe back to the sand, and for a moment, I let myself exhale. I remember thinking, she's okay. Maybe we're really on the other side of this. And then it happened. About 35 minutes in, I noticed Phoebe was struggling to breathe. Not just a little panting, but really struggling. Her breathing sounded like a seal, loud, raspy, strained, and she couldn't seem to inhale enough to catch a breath. On top of that, she was shivering from the water, and we were a quarter mile from the car. Panic hit, and it hit hard. At this point, I was certain that today was going to include a visit to the ER. Were they going to intubate her, do emergency surgery? Was she even going to make it home? I had no idea. Thankfully, her Chinese medicine vet was actually with us. We became friends by that point, and I was incredibly grateful she was there. She helped keep me grounded, monitored Phoebe's breathing, and gave me guidance on what to do in the moment. But no matter how calm we stayed, Phoebe wasn't getting any better, and we couldn't get her dry and out of the elements fast enough. So I did what I had to do. I picked her up, all 85 pounds of her, and started walking. I had to stop a couple of times to adjust my grip and rest my back, but we made it to the car. My other friend helped grab towels to dry her off with. We turned up the heat, and within a few minutes, her breathing started to improve. I remember sitting in the car with her afterward, watching her chest rise and fall, still processing what had just happened. And it finally clicked. All those past episodes, the ones that didn't quite fit the textbook definition of Lar Par, the ones no one could fully explain, they were her airway. They'd always been her airway. And this episode at the Boulder Res was confirmation. We were officially out of time. No more waiting, no more wondering. It was time to make a decision. And I know some of you might be questioning, why did I take her to the res that day? Why let her swim, chase rocks, run around after everything she'd been through? But my take, Phoebe's a dog who lives for those moments, swimming, rock diving, zooming along the shoreline. That is her joy. And after everything, she hadn't had that kind of day in such a long time. I just wanted her to feel like herself again, to be a dog, to do what she loves. And if I'm being honest, a part of me even thought if she went out getting rocks, she went out doing what she loved most. It wasn't carelessness, it was devotion. It was giving her one more day of freedom, of sunshine, of being fully alive. And I don't regret 1 second of it. I spent the next few days seriously contemplating my options because at this point, there were really only 2. The first was a surgical procedure called a tie-back. They'd go in through the side of her neck, pull back one side of the airway cartilage called the arytenoid, and stitch it permanently open to create space for air to pass through. It's been the gold standard for dogs with Lar Par for decades, and it's what most soft tissue surgeons recommend, but it's invasive. It requires general anesthesia, and it comes with a tough recovery, especially for a dog who's almost 14. So I had heard. The second option was something newer, a stent procedure I'd learned about in the Facebook group. Instead of surgery, they place a small round silicone stent inside the airway to hold it open. No incisions, no hospital stay, minimal recovery, and the results, honestly, they were impressive. There were tons of success stories. But the problem was only 2 doctors in the entire country were doing it. One in New Hampshire and one in Texas. I actually had a phone consult with the vet in Texas and was preparing to drive down there, stay for a week, and have it done. The idea of skipping surgery felt like a blessing, especially at Phoebe's age. But the risks were there, too. If something went wrong with the stent after I'd returned back to Colorado, I'd have to drive all the way back to Texas, 16 hours one way, because no one here in Colorado would know what to do. And there was a very real chance I'd still have to do the tieback eventually if the stent failed. The downside was, with either option, Phoebe would lose most of her bark, and unfortunately, she wouldn't be able to swim again. And if you know Phoebe, you know swimming, it's her thing. Collecting rocks is her purpose. It's her greatest joy. But this condition had obviously already taken that from her. And if I didn't intervene, it would take everything. And just as I was weighing the pros and cons, Phoebe had another episode, and then another, and another. They weren't happening during her naps anymore. They were happening while she was standing, while she was eating, while she was just being. She even started choking on food. And during those episodes, I had to physically shove my hand down her throat to open her airway. If I hadn't been trained as a nurse, if I hadn't stayed calm under pressure, she would not be here today. I couldn't leave the room. I wasn't sleeping well. Every cough made me stop in my tracks. Every nap, I watched her breath. It was getting worse, and it was getting worse fast. I had to make a decision. So I made it, because here's the truth. Phoebe still had so much life in her. She wasn't frail. She wasn't giving up. Her hind end was strong. Her energy was solid. She still wanted to hike and sniff and explore and collect rocks. Her only limitation was her airway, which, let's be real, is kind of essential to life. And that's what made the decision so clear. I believed in her ability to handle this because she'd already proven how strong she was. This dog has been a badass since the day I got her. Her cardiac workup at CSU had come back clean. Her labs were nearly perfect, and I fully believe that a lifetime of movement, swimming, hiking, and a diet full of fresh fruits and vegetables has kept her as strong as she is. There was a time when I didn't want to take swimming or rock diving away from her. That used to feel like too big of a loss, but now we were in crisis mode. This wasn't the end of Phoebe's story. This was just the chapter where she needed someone to fight for her. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am to be that person. I chose a tieback surgery, and I chose it for a lot of reasons. It was local for one, so if anything went wrong, we weren't 16 hours from help. The Chinese medicine vet I'd been working with had recommended an amazing surgeon, and after meeting with her, I felt solid. She'd done this procedure hundreds of times, and she walked me through everything with confidence and clarity. Phoebe had done well with anesthesia in the past. With her labs looking great and a healthy heart, I truly felt like she could handle it. And honestly, I wasn't sure she'd even survive the drive to Texas. That alone made the stent option feel really risky. So while it wasn't an easy choice, in my gut, I knew it was the right one. The bottom line was something had to be done because the thought of losing her without trying, that was just something I wasn't willing to live with. I scheduled the tieback surgery for March 27th. We were 2 weeks out, and those 2 weeks felt like a lifetime. Phoebe had several more episodes during that time, and I never knew when the next one was coming. I was on edge every single day, hypervigilant, constantly watching her chest rise and fall, listening for every cough, bringing my phone into the shower so I could watch her from the cameras in every room, just to make sure she was still okay. There were days I didn't know if we'd make it to surgery day, but we did. The morning of March 27th started early. I hadn't been sleeping well in the weeks leading up to this. Phoebe was sleeping beside me like always, but I was constantly half awake, checking on her every time she moved or coughed. But today was surgery day, and for the first time in months, it felt like relief might finally be coming for both of us. I got her off the bed and into the hallway, and just like that, it happened again. She was just standing there, still groggy from sleep, when her airway closed up. I barely heard it, but I saw it in her eyes. She could not breathe. Her eyes went wide. She was trying to cough, to breathe, to fix herself, and she couldn't. I started calling them silent suffocations because now she barely made a sound. And if I hadn't been watching her, I would have had no idea. Without even thinking, I dropped to the floor, opened her mouth, and shoved my hand down her throat to open up her airway. It was automatic by now, and just like that, she came back. stood there breathing again. We grabbed our things and drove straight to the hospital. It was still dark out when I loaded her into the truck. The streets were quiet, that early morning stillness that makes everything feel calm, which was exactly what we both needed. The entire drive, I kept my eyes on her through the rearview mirror, going over every worst-case scenario in my head. What would I do if she started choking in the truck? What if she stopped breathing in the back seat on our way there? Thankfully, none of those scenarios played out. We made it to the hospital. The parking lot was empty. The streetlights were still on. Phoebe was standing up in the back seat, ready to get out. She always knows when we arrive somewhere, and she gets in position for me to help her out. I guided her out of the truck. She stood there, shook off the ride, stretched, and then stood tall like she always does, still full of life and always ready to go. We made the short walk to the front entrance. I grabbed the handle, and the door was heavier than expected. As I pulled the door open, Phoebe made her way inside in front of me, sniffing everything. My mom always says, the nose knows, and it did. Inside, the kind lady at the desk checked us in. She asked, "What's your baby's name?" I told her Phoebe Giordano. I got her weight, and then we headed to the waiting room. Just being at the hospital, I felt relief. I knew we were in the safest place possible if something were to happen. Phoebe was sniffing everything, lots of smells to keep her stimulated, but I think the smells made her realize we were there for her. She pulled me to the door a couple of times, wanting to leave, but I was able to redirect her back to our seat. About 10 minutes went by before the vet tech came out. He was kind, funny, and most importantly, he was calm. You could tell right away that he actually cared. He asked me a few questions while Phoebe sniffed his scrubs like she knew he was part of the plan. I told him everything, that she'd had another episode that morning, that they were happening more often without warning, and that someone had to keep an eye on her every second before she went into surgery. I looked him in the eye and said, "Don't take your eyes off of her, not even for a second." And he nodded, no weirdness, no brush off. He got it. I kissed Phoebe on the head. I told her to be a good girl. And I said, the next time I see you, it's going to be a breath of fresh air for both of us. Phoebe trotted off with the tech like she knew exactly what this was. I just stood there in the lobby for a second, watching her walk away like the little badass she is. No hesitation, no looking back, just full trust that she was headed somewhere safe, somewhere she could finally breathe again. And then I walked out, got in my truck, and just sat there for a minute. That weird limbo moment where there's nothing left to do but wait. But I had somewhere to be. A few weeks earlier, before any of this spiraled, I had scheduled my annual mammogram for this very morning because, of course, I did. So I drove straight from the hospital to the breast imaging center because nothing says calm and grounded like going from emergency dog surgery to getting your boobs squished in a cold room with pastel walls and elevator music playing. And the contrast wasn't lost on me. Just hours before, I was on the floor shoving my hand down my dog's throat to open her airway. And now I'm filling out a form next to a table of pink brochures about self-checks and early detection. It was surreal, but also weirdly grounding. And I just kept coming back to something I said in episode 11. Worry is just wishing for something you don't want. I repeated that to myself like a mantra. Don't worry until there's something to worry about, Mary. And in this moment, there wasn't. Phoebe was in good hands. She was intubated. Her airway was finally protected. She was safe. And what I felt most was gratitude. Gratitude that she was in the best possible place. Gratitude that I would most likely never have to shove my hand down her throat again. Gratitude that relief was finally coming. My mammogram took less than 10 minutes, and I headed home to try to keep myself distracted while I waited for news. About 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was the vet tech. And then came the words I'd been holding my breath for. She's out of surgery. It went great. She's recovering well. She's waking up. The doctor will call you in a couple of hours with a full update. You can pick her up this evening. That was the moment I finally exhaled. Phoebe did it. Her airway was now permanently open. No more choking, no more collapsing, no more fear that I'd lose her in an instant due to this horrible disease. A little while later, the surgeon called to walk me through all the details. The tie-back procedure had gone smoothly. Phoebe had handled anesthesia like a champ. And while she was under, they also removed a small growth from her eyelid and cauterized a few skin tags around her eyes. So yep, Phoebe got a little cosmetic refresh while she was at it. New airway, smooth eyelids, and a post-op glow. And most importantly, she was breathing easier. They told me I could pick her up around 6, and you better believe I was counting down the minutes. Of course, I arrived a little earlier than I was supposed to. I couldn't help it. I was anxious to see my girl. I walked into the hospital, checked in at the front desk, and took a seat in the waiting room. A few minutes later, the same vet tech from that morning came out and waved me back. I followed him down the hallway into an exam room where he sat me down and walked me through everything, step by step. He explained how well the surgery went, what her meds were, how recovery was going to look for the next few weeks. He said her biggest job now was to stay calm. No barking, no panting, no excitement, so her airway could heal. That meant light sedation every day for 2 to 3 weeks. He told me to expect some light coughing here and there, especially after drinking water, and warned me about the biggest risk that comes with Tyvek surgery: aspiration pneumonia. With her airway now permanently opened on one side, any water or food that went down the wrong way could end up in her lungs. But I was ready. I had already bought a slow water bowl that I had read about in the Facebook Lar Par group, and I knew I'd be feeding her meatballs by hand about 4 times a day as opposed to her normal 2 times a day. I was fully prepared to do whatever it took for Phoebe to have a smooth recovery. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The vet tech finished up giving me all the info, and he left to go get her. And I just sat there, heart pounding, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. And when it finally did, Phoebe came running in, tail doing the windmill because hers doesn't go side to side. It makes full circles when she's happy. Her eyes lit up the second she saw me. I had expected her to be groggy from the meds, but I think the excitement took over. She looked incredible. She was breathing effortlessly, and somehow she looked 3 years younger with all the skin tags removed from around her eyes and that little eyelid mask gone. I kissed her face, scratched her butt, and I let her know how proud I was of her. She gave me kisses too, like she was saying, "Thank you, Mom, for helping me breathe again." Her spirit was light, not just because she could breathe, but because she knew. She knew she made it through. We made our way to the car, drove home, and when we pulled into the driveway, Petra was waiting at the front door. Petra knew something was up. She'd been acting off all day, worried, out of sorts. Phoebe and Petra are rarely ever apart, and she could sense something was up with Phoebe. Petra was around for every single one of Phoebe's episodes, and every single time, without fail, she had a look of deep concern in her eyes. As soon as I opened the door, Petra rushed over, the little nub of her tail bopping back and forth. She sniffed Phoebe all over, rubbed up against her, and then let her be. Phoebe climbed up on the couch, curled into her usual spot with her head on the armrest, and passed out. And just like that, we were on the other side. The slow water bowl, Phoebe figured it out on day 1. The meatball feedings, she loved our little one-on-one moments 4 times a day. She coughed occasionally, but nothing that concerned me. Her incision healed beautifully. Within a few days, we were taking short, slow walks in the cooler parts of the day, and she did amazing. You could tell by the way she moved. She could finally breathe. Her body felt lighter, her energy felt steadier, and then, just before her 2-week follow-up appointment, I took Phoebe and Petra to a park. We were just laying in the grass when Phoebe stood up, and so did Petra. They started playing, and while that might not sound like a big deal to most people, Phoebe and Petra hadn't played together in over a year because anytime she tried to do her little play growl, she'd choke and shut down, so she stopped. But this time, she let out her growl and she didn't choke. And when she realized she could breathe, she got the zoomies. She started running around in circles like a puppy, and I stood there watching her with almost tears in my eyes, thinking, after all that, we did the right thing. At our 2-week follow-up appointment, the surgeon was blown away by how well she was doing. She cleared Phoebe for regular activity, whatever she could tolerate. She said we could stop the sedation meds and even try feeding from a bowl again if she handled it. Phoebe had a new lease on life, a new chapter, a new breath, and watching her now, it's clear. We didn't lose anything. We gained everything. We're now almost 3 weeks out, and Phoebe just keeps getting better. Her walks are longer, her energy is stronger, and her spirit, it's back. This surgery gave Phoebe a second chance, and honestly, if I had known how smoothly it would go, if I had known how quickly she'd bounce back, I would have done it sooner. It's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole of worst-case scenarios online because, let's be real, people share their trauma way more than their relief. But what I've learned is this. The key isn't just the procedure, it's who does it. You need a soft tissue surgeon you trust. someone who's done this hundreds of times, someone who gets it. Because when you find that person and your dog is otherwise healthy, this doesn't have to be a horror story. Yes, it's major surgery. Yes, it comes with risks, but Lar Par is an older dog disease. And age is not a disease. It's a number, a chapter, not a verdict. Phoebe still had life left in her. She just needed a path forward. And I'm grateful every single day that I gave her one. So if you're in the thick of it, researching, second-guessing, reading Facebook posts at all hours of the night, I see you and I get it. This isn't an easy decision, but it can be a hopeful one. I wish I would have done the surgery sooner, but I'm so damn glad I did it at all, because now Phoebe can breathe again, and so can I. And while this episode has been all about Phoebe, it's also about what it means to pause and then come back. I didn't fall behind. I didn't lose momentum. I just hit pause for all the right reasons. And now I get to pick up where I left off, not in a scramble to catch up, but with clarity, with energy, and with a whole new level of gratitude. When I rebranded from the Joy Formula to Unapologetically Wild, it wasn't just about a new name. It was about finally owning the way I wanted to show up. More raw, more honest, more me. I launched this podcast, and even with everything going on, I stayed committed to it because it mattered, because it felt aligned, because it was the one thing I could keep showing up for. But my vision was bigger than this podcast. I wanted to grow my YouTube channel, to bring you with me on the road, on the trail, into the real life moments that don't fit into a 60-second reel. I wanted to write more, to tell deeper stories, to share the behind-the-scenes stuff that most people skip over. More long-form content, more real life, and more moments that make you feel something. And now that we're on the other side, I am so fucking ready to press play on life again. If this episode resonated with you, if you've ever had a soul dog or loved an animal so deeply it shifted your life, I'd love for you to share this episode with someone who gets it. Leave a review, hit follow, or send me a message and let me know what landed most. And if you're not already subscribed to my Unapologetically Wild newsletter, head to the show notes and sign up. That's where I share more real-life updates, what I'm cooking, reading, planning, and loving lately. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of this story. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for always cheering Phoebe on. Until next time, stay wild.